Natural Born Coaches, episode number 68.
You're listening to the Natural Born Coaches podcast, where coaches come every day to be inspired, learn how to get clients, and build a stronger business. And here's your host, friend to all coaches worldwide, Marc Mawhinney.
This episode is sponsored by 317 Sound Design. Before I started working with them, the amount of time I was taking to edit Natural Born Coaches was killing me. Now they handle all my editing needs, so I can spend my time doing what I love to do, and that's coaching and hosting this show. If you have a podcast, or if you're launching one, do yourself a favor. Go to 317sounddesign.com and get their help. You won't regret it. Hello, coaches, and welcome to another episode of Natural Born Coaches, the daily podcast for your coaching business. I'm Marc Mawhinney, and it is a very chilly day in Canada today when we're recording, but I hope you're inside nice and warm, and I know we've got people all over the world, and they're probably in warmer spots than me now, but we're going to try to warm everyone up today with a good show, because we have a great guest with us today. He is a life coach, a mentor, and an author. This is Roger Laidig. How are you, Roger?
Very good.
You know what's really weird? I don't know if you believe in coincidences or not, but we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and you live in a part of Indiana that rang a bell with me because I'm in the process of reading a book on the legendary coach John Wooden, A Coach's Life by Seth Davis. And it's funny when we were just chatting about where you're from and everything, but you're in Wooden country, and I thought that was really neat. I guess it's kind of a, cue the Twilight Zone music here, but so are you a basketball player?
Well, I'm a basketball at my age. I'm a basketball fan.
Yes.
There was a day when I was a player, but now I stick to the stands.
Yeah, that book was it's interesting. I'm not done yet because I'm doing the audiobook version. I think it's 25 hours, so I'm probably a few hours into it. But I thought it was really neat. It was explaining how basketball got to be so big in the state of Indiana. And it was talking about how football isn't quite as big there because all the young men had to work on the farms during like the nice weather, and they needed the sport in the winter basically to participate in, and that's where they got hooked up with a Canadian, Mr. Naismith, there with basketball and everything, and that's how it became so huge in that state. So I thought that was really neat because I'm always picturing, this is me with my Canadian maybe lack of knowledge with all the different regional things in the States, but I'm always picturing, football country for a lot of the places and those being big things, but it sounds like basketball's where it's at for Indiana.
Yeah, when I grew up, and it still is a lot that day in rural Indiana, you will very rarely see a home without a basketball hoop on the garage or somewhere, or in the barn. That's what we did. We played basketball. We shot. If we're, and you're right about the work standpoint. Like when I was raised with milk cows, and then during the warmer seasons, we planted the crops and harvested them, and so winter was kind of the time we had a little extra time. But anytime during the summertime, we would use the any gap, we'd be shooting baskets or something.
Well, it sounds like today down there you could do some hockey as well.
We could easily do hockey. I'm looking out my window at the river, the frozen river. It might be a little bit rough hockey out there, but we could do it.
You could do it today.
Yeah.
Well, Roger, I'm going to give the audience a little bit better idea about what you do, and then we're going to turn it over to learn some advice from you on the whole crazy world of coaching and see what we can find out. So are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Perfect. Well, as mentioned, Roger is a life coach. He's a mentor. He's an author. And he recently wrote a book entitled Finding Purpose and Joy, It's a Journey. And he also offers Finding Purpose and Joy Life Mentoring. And that's right up our alley here because, of course, we talk a lot about Natural Born Coaches about finding that purpose and being happy with what you're doing, because there's no sense doing something if you're not having fun with it. So the purpose of Roger's book is a lot there about his personal journey of overcoming obstacles and some life-changing insights and inspiration for all the readers to find more purpose in their life and joy. So it's, as said, a perfect theme for Natural Born Coaches, and I want to welcome you to the show, Roger. Can you start by telling us a little more of your backstory and how you became a coach?
Yeah, thanks for asking. My humble beginnings I would have never guessed that I would end up doing what I'm doing. I was raised on a farm, but I knew early on that that's not what I wanted to do for a living. And I went to Purdue and got my engineering degree. And I knew when I was 10 years old, I knew I wanted to go to Purdue. I knew I wanted to be an engineer, and I knew I wanted to work at Oliver Corporation, which was an ag manufacturer that built tractors and plows, and I wanted to be an engineer there. Well, all that stuff happened. I went to Purdue, I became an engineer. I went to Oliver to work, and 3 days after I started becoming an engineer, sitting down at the drafting board in those days, I realized I don't want to do this the rest of my life. But it was a great start. I spent 3 years at the designing. Then I worked in a manufacturing operation and became the superintendent of manufacturing, and realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. I thought I always wanted to build homes, so I built 30 homes and managed a real estate firm. And I really didn't enjoy the home building part, but what I did enjoy was the sales part, the upbeat part of relationships and connecting with people. And that started helping me understand who I was and what really worked and what didn't work. And as the universe or God or however one believes would have it, our family, my cousin had a company going. It was an ag-based company, but that industry was changing, so they needed to go to develop an industrial division. So I was brought on to start that industrial division, and the person to do that needed to have an engineering background, needed to understand manufacturing, needed to understand construction, and needed to understand sales. And so everything I had done had led me to that point.
Yeah, you could check off every box there. It was almost like it was made for you.
Exactly. And I spent 30 years there and then retired 3 years ago. But over the 30 years, I started realizing more and more, I'm a lot more interested in people than I am things. I mean, I understand engineering, I understand equipment, but that didn't really trip my trigger. What tripped my trigger was, number one, motivating our salesmen by understanding who they were and what obstacles they were facing, and I became intrigued with coaching them, and then other people that worked in our organization. And I did a fair amount of sales training and organizational training as well. And the latter part of my career, I could just feel myself moving away from the core business of Leydig, our company, to I needed to be involved with investing in people. Along the way, I found out a lot about myself. When I built homes, I found out who I wasn't, and I started finding out who I was. And then, as I was doing the training at Leydig, one thing that became apparent to me was there was a book I read that says, "Understand yourself first and then others." And it had some battery of tests and things like that using the DISC scale, the DISC, the dominant, influential, those different temperament type of things. And that was so intriguing to me. And then for my salesmen, they first need to understand who they were, but they needed to understand their audience and how to connect with their audience. And so we did a lot of studying of human thinking and what makes people tick, and come to a realization that what is right for one person may be totally different for another person. And I found out those were the things that really tripped my trigger. And at the same time, at home, I'll just be honest with you, the book that I wrote is a very honest book. Things were not going well at home. My wife and I were never going to get divorced because we didn't believe in it, but we were like living two separate lives under the same roof. And I knew she was miserable and unhappy, and that crushed me, but I didn't know what to do about it. I was broken. And I went to a couple different counselors, and the one counselor said, well, obviously, Roger, you're right and she's wrong. We need to get her to change. Well, she came in, and for about 2 weeks that worked, and then it just got worse and worse. Until a second counselor I went to, he was a faith-based counselor. He didn't push Christianity or Muslim or anything like that on you, but he's faith-based in terms of understanding your spirit, the human spirit. And to make a long story short, what he taught me was I was not valuing my wife. I thought I was, but I didn't value her feelings. I didn't value her perspective. And so that started, every time she didn't feel valued by me, I put a brick on the wall between us until we could hardly see each other. And I was really humbled. I remember sitting there in his office when my wife finally had a chance to express herself, and the counselor said to me, Roger, do you know that your wife doesn't think that you care about her at all, about her feelings or about what she thinks? I said, well, that's not true. But I started finding out it was absolutely true. I'm a fairly strong-minded individual, and I just think I'm right. So we just roll with it. You know, I'm a type A personality, or have a dominant type personality, but I was running over her, and I didn't even realize it. And it was so humbling. I remember we would practice talking, where my job was to paraphrase what she said so that I could say back to her what I thought she said, and then she could say, no, that's not quite what I meant. This is what I meant. Or yes, that is what I meant. And we started doing that, and after a session or so, he said, Roger, are you serious? I said, absolutely I am. He said, we're terrible at this. And we had a good enough relationship that I knew he wasn't really attacking me, but he wanted me to understand how far I had to go. And he knew that I was invested, which is really key. And that started us on a journey. And in the book, in my book, Finding Purpose and Joy, it's about that journey of obstacles. And a lot of our obstacles have to do with our relationships. Now, they carry over into other things, but a lot of them start with relationships. And the book that I wrote is about that journey of the steps that were revealed to me over the years, that I put into a format of 10 steps, that if we take them pretty much in order, it just unfolds life in a whole way that we've never seen before. They seem like simple things, but we don't do them.
Right, and I want to thank you for being so open and candid there, because a lot of times, of course, as coaches, we're afraid to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable, or, you know, show any of that other side of things that aren't going completely right. So thank you for sharing that. And it sounds like, just from hearing your story, that you would probably, even though you didn't identify yourself as a coach for many years through your life, that you probably are a natural born coach. It just took a while to officially consider yourself, define yourself as a coach.
Well, that's exactly what happened, Mark. Because when I started interacting with people as I was going through this journey, they started coming to me asking questions. And I found myself mentoring, informally mentoring them. And we might be having breakfast together or meeting from time to time, and then it was small groups of people. And it just happened naturally. So that's why the title of your business, or I guess you'd call it a business, or your show of Natural Born Coaches really resonated to me, because I didn't plan it. I wasn't even thinking about it, but it happened, and it is who I am.
Yeah, I hear that so many times, just in different versions of it, from hosting a daily podcast, from guests. They may not realize it at the time, but really their whole life they're in training to be a coach, and then they finally step out and start a business actually coaching. But if you had gone out, say, in the 70s or even the 80s and said, I'm going to be a life coach, mentor, well, life coach probably wasn't being used back then, but if you said I'm going to be a coach, mentor, or whatever, people would look at you like you had two heads in Indiana, probably. Because what the heck's a coach? Or are you going to be a basketball coach, Roger? And now it's great to see with technology and everything else, the industry coming along, and it's becoming so much more accepted, because nowadays it's not unusual to have a coach or to have several coaches, and it's a lot of very successful people realize that they need coaches to get to the next level.
Yep.
Yeah, so no, that's a great. So it was 3 years ago that you actually started your business. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, and what?
Even then, it was. Well, let's see. I retired in May. I retired on April 1st of 2011, and people began asking me, "What are you going to do?" And I thought about. I kind of knew what I wanted to do, but I thought I need to put this in a way that people can understand. So I developed a business card, and the business card said, "Desiring to help people find purpose and joy." And that's really what my coaching was, helping people find their purpose in life and find joy in life. And so, yes, when I retired, that's when it officially began to take root, under the name of Finding Purpose and Joy.
Oh, wow.
That then just kind of, it stayed with me, and then it just kind of developed one thing to another. But, I never felt that I could really hang my shingle or in any way out that I was a mentor or coach, because the truth was things weren't perfect at our home. Who am I to tell others what they should do? I got things in my life I'm still working on, and so I didn't have that confidence. And it wasn't till, actually it was a year ago at this time, to tell you how the story goes. A year ago, this about right now, after years of learning and going through this journey, my wife said to me, "Roger, you need to write a book." And that was to me that was like God speaking to me through Susan. It's time for you to take this seriously and more formally. And so we go to Florida in March, and I told her I wanted to go down a week ahead of time. So last March, I went down a week ahead of time, and I had been listening to this thing called How to Write a Book as Soon as Possible. It was a 30-day thing, and I made notes as I listened to it. And when I got down to Florida then, I started writing, and I wrote a chapter a day for 2 weeks and wrote my book, Finding Purpose and Joy. And that's really when Finding Purpose and Joy took the next step of formality, of putting it in book form.
Yeah, congrats on being able to push through and do it that quick, too. I'm going to have to get a copy of that resource that you mentioned, because that's in my list of goals here for 2015, and it's going in spurts just with everything else going on, but I'd like to really focus on getting that book done. So it's definitely gives hope to all of us listening who have a book in us for 2015 to know that you were able to finish it and hammer it out in a matter of weeks.
The thing is, it's something that I had been writing my whole life. It just wasn't on paper.
Right. It just kind of came out naturally. Yeah.
Yeah. It came natural. I didn't have to. I intentionally only wrote one chapter a day so I could have a little time in between to breathe, and then wake up the next day and kind of read through it again and see if I really meant what I wrote, and then write another chapter. And I didn't have to change very much stuff. It just kind of flowed.
Yes.
And of course, I made grammatical corrections and changed a few things in terms of the organization of the book. But other than that, I knew it was right because I didn't have to force anything.
Right. Well, Roger, we're just going to take a really quick break here for a minute just to get a word in about our sponsor of the show, and then we'll be right back. I'd like to give a shout out to one of the sponsors of Natural Born Coaches, and that's Sales Elevator. I love Sales Elevator. It's a turnkey marketing service specifically for us coaches that requires no new software, no training, and no big learning curve. It helps us keep in touch with our clients and prospects and stay on top of their minds. Get started at saleselevator.com today. Okay, we are back with Roger Laidig. He's a life coach, mentor, and an author. He's the author of Finding Purpose and Joy, It's a Journey, and we're talking about his journey today on Natural Born Coaches. Roger, I'm just curious, how do you stay motivated every day?
Well, for me, I can only speak for myself, but it's what I would tell anyone. And it's what my hope is in the purpose of my life right now, is to help people find who they really are. Because when you get engaged in things that you're passionate about, it's not hard to be motivated. Motivation is difficult when we're not quite in alignment with who we're made to be. And because I really do feel I'm in alignment with how God made me and with the desires of my heart, every day is a fresh day that I can't wait to get started on. And when I was still in the work world, that was fading. And I mean, I always enjoyed work, as far as generally speaking. But I would have to kind of convince myself, when everybody said they were looking forward to Friday, I'd always tell them, well, I'm looking forward to Monday so we can get back at it again. But that was more self-talk than it was.
Well, there's a great quote by Donnie Deutsch, the marketing or ad person in New York, and he's been on like The Apprentice with Donald Trump and everything, and it's always stuck with me. And I think it's something like he said, you're doing the right thing when Sunday night feels the same as Friday night or something like that. You know, basically, if you're pumped to get into the office on Monday morning like it's a weekend, then you're probably passionate and enjoying what you're doing. So I think your business and your focus definitely shows that point. And I'm just curious as well, with your coaching business and your new clients, are you working mostly with clients who are local, or are you doing anything virtually, or what's the breakdown there?
Both. Most of it's local, because I didn't really start the virtual aspect until a few months ago. And it's taking off, but it takes a while to build that. But again, I'm not trying to force it. I believe this has been given to me, and it's not mine to rush. And so most of it just comes naturally through local connections. But as time goes on, one by one, phone mentoring or Skype mentoring is beginning to take place as well.
Great. So speaking of Skype, we like to talk about online resources and tools. Is there one resource that you find really valuable for your coaching business?
Well, a couple things. Skype certainly, well, even when you and I connected, I was glad to hear that you did Skype, because to me that's the best way to do it. And like right now, I'm talking with earphones on, so I don't have to hold the telephone, and we have a clear connection. And so I think that Skype is a great way to go. Some people like to do it face to face, with visual as well, and I'm comfortable with that. But I'm comfortable just talking without pictures too. So it's really kind of whatever the customer or the client feels is most comfortable with.
Right.
But Skype, you and I were talking earlier, I do a lot of reading, but I don't do it with my eyes. I do it with my ears. And the reason I do it with my ears is that I had a heart attack in 1999, and after that, make a long story short, but it is part of the story, the doctor told me I asked him, how do I live a reasonable life from here on? He said, learn to eat right, exercise, and learn to manage stress. Well, the first two are pretty easy if you're committed to it. Learning to eat right and to exercise. And so to exercise, I walk every day. And so it's natural for me to listen to books as I walk or as I'm driving somewhere. And, I can listen to probably 20, 30 books a year by doing that. So I think that's a great way to take on new learning and new perspectives.
Yes, no, I love audiobooks as well. That's a bit, you'd swear I talk about it so much on the show, you'd think I have stock in Audible or something, but I do love them. So, and speaking of books, is there a book that you can recommend for the audience that's really had a big impact on your life?
Well, there have been a few over the years that have I'd say two stand out. One is, a few years ago, Stephen Covey was very well known for 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then his son came out with a book, The Speed of Trust. I think those two books are outstanding in terms of they really embody great coaching principles and great living principles, effective living principles. Then the third book, so the two books would be 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and then The Speed of Trust by the Coveys. Then the third one is The DNA of Relationships by Gary Smalley. The DNA of Relationships by Gary Smalley. Actually, those were 3 of the key books, and if you read them all, you'd be reading probably 500 or 600 pages. But I took the essence of those when I wrote my book, Finding Purpose and Joy, and you will find in my book in 80 pages the everyday common usage of practical walking out the things that I've learned in those books, as well as through the School of Hard Knocks, through my book, The Finding Purpose and Joy. It's the book that I use for my mentoring, in fact.
Yeah, that's those are awesome books, and I've had a chance to, with a few of the interviews, to speak with people who had met Stephen Covey or spoken to him. One of our past guests hosted a radio show for years, and he did like 1,500 interviews or something, and Stephen Covey was one of them. So that was really, I imagine it would be quite a thrill to have been able to speak to him back then. So,
in fact, I'm going to have lunch with his son, Stephen M. R. Covey, in a couple of weeks down in Indianapolis.
Oh, wow. Well, no, that's interesting. That's hopefully it'll warm up by then.
Yeah,
it's not. You're not going to be out on the patio enjoying lunch, probably.
No, we won't be doing that. No.
So, Roger, we have a lot of listeners who are newer coaches, or maybe they're just feeling a little bit stuck with their business right now, and they want to give it a shot in the arm. If you were sitting across the table from that coach, what's one piece of advice that you would give them?
One of the major things of learning that have happened to me since I really have tried to formalize my thinking on mentoring is understanding what a good mentoree would be. Who would be a good candidate for a person that you're going to mentor? And it's important to understand that, because if you try to force it on someone, it never works. And a good mentoree is one that clearly recognizes their need and admits it and says, I'm unhappy with life as it currently is going, and I really want to change. If that level of commitment is not there, mentoring and coaching is like banging your head against a wall. And so a lot of it is qualifying who you're going to mentor, to make sure that you're using your time wisely and it's appreciated and valued. I'm at the stage of life where I don't have to have people pay me money. And the fact is, I would rather have just their total commitment first. If they do that, it won't be a cost to them. It'll be an investment into their lives. If they're not willing to invest money in their lives, they're not a good candidate.
Right. Yeah, that's another theme that's come up on the show a lot is, that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. So that's a great piece of advice. So we're almost out of time, Roger. I'm just wondering, do you have anything going on right now in your coaching business that you're really excited about in 2015?
Well, we just briefly talked about it, but what's being laid on my heart is, I believe that the foundation of love and the foundation of great relationships is trust. And a lot of people don't think of trust that way. But if you think about who you really could love or who you really will engage with and have a great relationship, it requires a lot of trust. You need to trust each other. And trust comes in so many different forms that we never even think about. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm going to a seminar, a conference, as a small conference that Stephen M.R. Covey is putting on in Indianapolis, and then having lunch with him afterward to learn more about the elements of trust. And I hope to, maybe, I won't force it, but maybe I can boil those elements of trust down to a fairly short book of 80 pages or so. Because when I started writing a book, I was learning that people don't read much anymore. And there are readers, but the average person, if you give them a thick book, they'll never touch it. And so I've tried to make things simple and short so they don't discourage people before they even get started. So I guess if I have something on my mind right now, it's I'm pursuing the seed of this trust thing and seeing if maybe I want to write a book on trust in our practical lives, how to live out trust every day in practical ways that we don't even think about.
Yeah, that's a way to do it. Keep the information easy to digest, and you don't want it. We were talking about Atlas Shrugged before we started recording. You don't want to make necessarily an Atlas Shrugged size book that people aren't going to get through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's great, Roger. And can you tell the listeners where they can find you online?
Yes. I have all my information about everything I do, the mentoring, the book, how to buy the book, at www.findingpurposeandjoy.com. Again, that's www.findingpurposeandjoy.com.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. We've had Roger Laidig. He's a coach, mentor, author, and doing a lot of stuff, of course, author with the book that he's discussing. So it's been a real pleasure having you on the show, Roger.
Well, it's a privilege to be invited. Thank you so much for that.
And thanks to you, the listeners, because you're what makes this podcast possible. I will see you all in the next episode of Natural Born Coaches.
Are you ready to turn your love of coaching into a business, but don't know how to do it? Could your existing coaching business use a shot in the arm? Marc is doing one-on-one mentoring with a select number of coaches. Go to naturalborncoaches.com/mentor for more information today.